Hi, it's Leader Post Sports Editor Rob Vanstone, and as is our wont, we are here for the weekly Rider Rumblings podcast. I'm here with Murray McCormick, our esteemed football writer, and lots of topics to address. Hopefully within these 20 minutes we can get to them all satisfactorily. Let's start off with the victory, the unfathomable victory in my books. Friday night in BC, the Riders won 31-17 to end a 4-game losing streak, and to put a lot of miseries in the back seat. You were there. How on earth did they do that, Mur?
There's as many wrinkles to that game as to your suit jacket. No.
Well, at least I didn't raid the drapery like you did.
That's true, Jerry. We're all kind of dressing up a little bit for this today. I really think, and it's kind of overlooking the coaching job that Corey Chamberlain did. He had them so prepared and so ready to play. It's almost like if he went back and watched what happened when they won 8 of their first 9 games and said, what did we do right? What were we doing things that worked perfectly and seemed to be just working together for the team? And you look back on that game, Durant didn't have any turnovers, didn't have any picks. The defense had lots of pressure on the young quarterback. The return game returned with a strong play by Jock Sanders, and Corey Sheets was back. So I guess all of that made everything work out to be such a perfect thing. I know we talk about that 21-yard run that Corey Sheets made that was just spectacular. That 4-yard handoff just seemed to change the whole vibe to the team. I think even the BC players were watching to see what Corey Sheets did on his first play, and he just showed that he was going to be back and be back strong. And that was kind of one of the defining. I know it's the only one carry, and there's 60-odd plays left in the game. But even that play, you could see the offensive line stood up a little stronger. They snapped off the ball a little stronger. The defense played a little better, and just having Corey Sheets back in the lineup made Corey Chamberlain's preparations look perfect. Like George Cortez was a genius again. Darian Durant was once again back being the talk of the most outstanding player. So,
and now they're all back in the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame. They've been reinstated this week.
They have been. It's funny. I saw the coaches on my way back to the hotel, and I said, "You guys are geniuses again." As I always, when I see them, and they go, "Yeah, that happens in Saskatchewan. One week we're idiots, the next week we're geniuses, and this week we can go upstairs to everyone be so happy that we know we did a lot of good things." And it was a team win, but I think the preparations really were key. I really think it was, not saying they weren't prepared for these other games, but they just seemed, when Montreal beat them, they said they weren't ready for that pass rush. When Winnipeg did, they had that impressive pass rush, and Durant got picked. So preparation was the key, and we're all happy. Aren't you happy?
I'm ecstatic. Fewer emails to answer this week. It was starting to feel like an open line show at my desk for a while. And I love hearing from people, and that's fun. But it was going nuts, and it was just the same thing every week with people going after Durant, going after this and going after that. When a team has a 4-game losing streak, everyone's a target, and that comes with the territory. But just like it was earlier in the year when they were winning every week and the angle didn't seem to change, suddenly they were losing every week and the angle didn't seem to change. And sometimes in this business we cheer for angles as much as teams, and now we have some fresh angles this week, and that's kind of a tonic for people who do what we do. The interesting thing to me, I thought, was even preparation-wise, they didn't come out of the gate and score a bunch of points. They never do. Watching Darian Durant, even when they zoomed in on him before the game, he looked like he really meant business. You could see his eyes just burning out of his helmet. And I remember watching that on Friday night on TV and thinking, gee, Darian is really wired for this game. He's really dialed up for it. And I think that was reflective of the entire team's attitude. That 2-point conversion, they did that against Calgary a couple of times during the regular season home opener. That was, I think, reflective of their attitude. They really meant business, and they were going to be the aggressors even though they were on the road, and look at the results.
I always cheer for the story. We both know that, and that's a good, we want stories. Good stories make for, it doesn't matter what happens, the results, as long as you get a good story.
And we cheer against overtime.
Overtime, yes, especially in BC. I'm feeling a little bit older today than I did before I left to go to BC because it's a tight one. I agree with you on Durant. It was, that tweet kind of woke him up, I think. I know he kind of got focused. He's the last guy I thought would have tweeted an inappropriate tweet. I really thought he was so much in control of his emotions, even though I know he's a lot thinner skinned than people think he really is. He does hear, he is aware of what's being said about them. People tell him he's that type of guy. He's that age when they follow his stuff on the internet. So, well, I think that got him going. It was funny when in the scrums we were talking to him after practice today. He talked about that. I think he ran 2 more times. Kind of joking. He kind of pointed out a couple of mistakes that the media had, little things. I mentioned something about interceptions. He reminded me he didn't have those many. So he was kind of back to being the Durant of old, a little bit sort of give and take with the scrums, which is fun. And I think he has returned. That's the Corey Sheets factor. I think he never, I'm not saying he believed that Garrett could be the guy. I don't think he really deep down thought he could be. So I think if you can understand what that means, I don't think he had as much confidence in Garrett, but they had the confidence in Corey Sheets. And what a game for Corey Sheets. I know it's only 80 yards, but he still had one of those games that I think we're going to look back on this season might be the turning point.
Well, that 21-yard run. Granted, it wasn't one of his games where he had 150 yards. It's not one of those games where he's buying the offensive line hamburgers. But that 21-yard run, when he's going to the right, he's cornered by 3 Lions, and he just cuts upfield, leaves 3 of them grasping, and then makes a move. I think it was on Ryan Phillips. And by the end of it, there had been 6 Lions who had been chasing him on that play. And that's half the defense. And right before that, there was a 24-yard punt return by Jock Sanders, which was pretty crucial. So you get that, the special teams are going. Jock Sanders is back. Then you get the run by Corey Sheets. Shortly thereafter, there's the questionable pass interference penalty on J.R. LaRose, gets him down deep. And then there's a touchdown to Weston Dressler. And that was another thing, Toomer. They finished. During the 4-game losing streak, how many times were they first and goal and didn't come away with a touchdown? In this game, 3 times inside the 10-yard line, they scored every time. Corey Sheets a 6-yard run and a 1-yard run, and Weston Dressler with a 6-yard touchdown reception. So suddenly, they're finishing drives, and that accounted for a lot of the margin of victory.
So are we putting too much weight on this victory, though? Do you think that, I know we're getting a little bit caught up in the fact that they're still 1-4 in their last 5 games. No, since 7-1 they haven't, or 8-1. You know, they haven't played that well as this. Are we putting too much weight on this one, bro? Are we getting too caught up in this? Is this, you know, it's still 1 win. It's still BC. Well, I know it changes the attitude and stuff, but are we still? It was
a potential season changer for them. If they lose that game, then we're talking about mathematics and, okay, if this happens and they get help from this team and this team and this team, and if they need so many things to go in their favor if they lose that game. And suddenly, after losing 4 games, many of which were winnable, 2 in a row at home, and the whole tweet gate, then to go into BC against a Lions team that's purring, a Lions team that had not lost a regular season home game in 12 appearances at BC Place. And to win that game, when so many factors seem to be conspiring against them, I'm not sure. Simple math says that 4 is greater than 1, but I almost view that win as coming very close to neutralizing the losing streak, because of the position to put the Riders in. It was not a cure-all, but it was a very helpful and timely Band-Aid, I think.
Because I look back in that first game against BC as I thought was must-win, because that kind of game would have given them all this stuff headed down the stretch. That was a must-win game. Maybe that's what I'm questioning it, but that was a game they had to win, because, boy, they got a lot of problems. You know, even today the court case comes up again. Nothing happened, but it's been postponed. But that all this stuff that got on the streak is still percolating, and now not even brought up because of the win meant so many good things to them. And we're kind of overlooking the fact that Dressler had another game, another come-out big game, and Chris Getzlaff. Boy, he's the 2nd leading receiver in the league. Well, I believe that. Who would have thought that? With everything went on with this team, Chris Getzlaff would be having that type of season. So they're getting their weapons are getting back to where they needed to be, and I guess it's going to be a fun 4 games ahead.
Topics to discuss during the second half of the Rider Rumblings podcast. We hope you'll stick with us for the denouement of our denouement. What's that French? For the conclusion of our Rider Rumblings podcast.
You always make me head to Google. I don't know what that word means either.
Hi, I'm Rob. This is Murray, and we're back for part 2 of the Rider Rumblings podcast. Somehow, I guess, somewhat remiss in not discussing the Alex Hall trade yet. It shows how eventful it's been recently. They acquired the league leader in quarterback sacks and was in part 2. So, what are your thoughts on that trade that was completed on Sunday?
Well, at first I said, why? They came out, they just had 5 sacks. Jermaine McIlvain had 2. The defensive line played great. I thought, well, maybe they found that rotation thing with Heidi Taylor being out with a knee injury. They were kind of missing that. So, and then I looked and went, oh, they got the sack leader. They gave a Patrick Neufeld, who's a good young player. They don't ever overlook the fact that his contributions, but they get back a second-round pick, which is probably going to be 10th overall in 2014. So that was a huge pick. It was, and then they gave him one in 2015. But I think it's a good trade. I think it's a trade that helps both teams, and I think if you can say that, you got to say that's a good thing. Winnipeg is trying to rebuild. The 2 ways they got to rebuild is at a quarterback and with an offensive line. And I think Patrick Neufeld gives them that. And the Riders had a need at defensive end. I know it does seem kind of funny when you talk about the defense, but they got out of that rotation. And one of the reasons Ricky Foley's been so strong these last 5 or 6 games is he's had a rest break. People forget Ricky Foley plays on special teams, so he's on the field a lot, and you give him a bit of a rest, and he can become have more of an impact. And you get a guy like Alex Hall. So now there's never a break for the quarterback. You got Chick and Foley coming. So a great trade for both teams, I think, and the Riders get a really good draft pick out of the deal. I think your column pretty well summed it all up very well the other day. That I think the Bombers got fleeced.
I also agree with my column.
Do you?
Patrick Neufeld's an interesting study because they re-signed him during the offseason and had pretty big plans for him as a cornerstone player for the offensive line. But then he gets hurt. Ben Heenan comes in. You're not going to move Ben Heenan. When Chris Best comes back, you got to find room for Chris Best. So where were you going to put Patrick Neufeld the way things were evolving? And he may have ended up in Ottawa. So with that being considered, I think it made him a lot more expendable than anyone would have imagined coming into the regular season. And he may very well start for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for a lot of years, and I hope he does. He's a great young man, but when you look at the situation facing the Riders, how many opportunities do you get to acquire the league leader in quarterback sacks? And I mean, 2 years ago we were talking about Montez Murphy and Ramond Willis and Luke Mullender, and wondering if there was a defensive end anywhere within the 306. And suddenly they got 3 guys who can terrorize a quarterback. I think if there's ever a year to have an embarrassment of riches, it would be this year with the Grey Cup looming. Plus, another factor, John Schick's 30, Ricky Foley's 31 years old. So, and CFL regular season's 18 games, playoffs can be a war, and they may have to win 3 playoff games to win a Grey Cup. So don't you need some extra bodies and a little bit of a younger presence? I don't see a downside for the Riders. If people are picking this trade apart in any way, I just think that's an extreme as far as nitpicking.
Well, the nitpicking goes because you're trading a Canadian for an import, which is supposedly taboo in the CFL. This is not this one. They have depth there. They have Corey Watman. They have Dan Clark. They have a couple guys they had on the practice roster who haven't been here but have been here, if people know what I mean. So they got some guys out there that can build them. So you make a good trade, and you got to give up something to get a good player. You're not going to get a guy like Alex Hall for nothing, and even though the position Winnipeg is in. So they give up. I was kind of impressed with Hall. He's kind of your prototypical defensive end. Tall, 6'6", got the long arms. He's not the NFL built where he's got that sort of big, wide base that you see on the. But he looks like kind of like a greyhound out there, kind of an athlete, and he was moving pretty well in practice today. And I think he's going to fit in so well into that rotation that I think people say, yeah, it's a rental. It was funny. He reacted to the rental question, saying, "What do you mean, like enterprise?" He showed a little bit of humor there, and it was kind of an unfair question from one of the media guys. Because I think rental that's what he is. But I also think, and I broached this when I wrote my story, that Regina's a pretty good place to play football. This isn't Winnipeg. This is a team that's got success. It's got coaches. They spend money. They have, they make the players' lives pretty comfortable. And I think he may find out through his first experience. And I'm not saying that Winnipeg doesn't do all those things, but the Riders make the players comfortable, and the veterans want to come here and play. And I think once he gets 4 games of hanging around here and finding out how the locker room works and all that kind of stuff, he may want to come back here. But hard to turn down an NFL contract when it's usually 3 or 4 times over making the CFL.
Yeah,
so.
and you're going to get some playoff checks.
Yeah.
And I think the NFL thing may work to the Riders' benefit. Here's a guy who really wants to showcase himself toward the end of the year, and this may rejuvenate or even enliven his season.
2009, Ray Williams had the playoffs, and I still haven't seen a better playoff run than Ray Williams did. And he translated that into a contract with the Steelers. Probably would have made him if not for that knee injury. And and he would have made his pension. That was a huge. That's a guy. So the playoffs kind of make a long playoff run can help a lot. So Alex Hall was funny. He was kind of quiet. He said afterwards it was probably the most press he's had all year, which tells another thing. Welcome to Regina, buddy, because now even the rush ends is the focus of a lot of our attention. But I guess we can probably segue into the fact that he's going to play this weekend. I don't think they're going to take any time for him to learn the system or how to decide where he's going to fit into the overall scheme of things. He's going to play against Edmonton, and that's a pretty weak offensive line for Edmonton. I don't think we're saying anything people aren't quite aware of, and whoever they have at quarterback is going to be in for a long game with those 3 guys coming at him pretty hard. So I don't see a lot of reason, if I was an Edmonton fan, for optimism here. I think the Roughriders are back to the team that handled them at home and in Edmonton twice, so I think
they better be.
They better be, boy. Because do they lose all the momentum and lose to Edmonton?
A lot of goodwill disappears.
Yeah, but they still have the playoff spot clinched. And Edmonton really needs a lot of stuff to go right for them to have any sort of opportunity. So it would just give us a whole bunch of more stories to cheer for, I guess, once what happens to Edmonton. But it is a trap game. I know you brought that up earlier than this year. I think trap games happen later in the season, especially where the CFL schedule works out with 2 teams being out of it. And I think when you're looking ahead to the playoffs, I think they have to be aware of what the Eskimos, because I still think Edmonton has a pretty good defense. I know they gave up a lot of points, but I still think I like their front line. So,
if the Riders had lost on Friday, they could have mailed in the last month. They would have been in the playoffs and probably been in 3rd place. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they won on Friday, I think, makes them a much tougher opponent for Edmonton on Saturday, because now they've got to win out if they want to accomplish some of their goals. And with 2 home games against Edmonton, 3 out of their final 4 at home, the schedule is weighted in their favor, at least as far as the venue. So if they lost to BC, maybe it really doesn't really matter whether they win or lose against Edmonton. They're going to be in the playoffs. But now they're playing for a home playoff game, whereas they wouldn't have realistically been doing that had they lost last Friday. So I don't see any reason why the Riders should have any sort of letdown against Edmonton on Saturday, because the opponent isn't the issue. It's the prize that's the issue, and they sort of restored a lot of optimism as far as the likelihood of them attaining that goal.
Do we throw a challenge at the fans? I know there's 35,000 the last game. You go, that's pretty good. Like most teams would take that. Should they be selling it out now? Have the Roughriders earned that confidence from the fans? For these people that have to put out their own money to pay to go to a game, they have to pay for parking, pay for food and stuff. Is it up to the fans now to say, we're giving you guys everything you want? Should they have to step up a little bit more with filling that stadium?
It's hard to put pressure on the fans when you look at it and you're saying you're settling for 35,000 people.
I know.
I remember I was at the first sellout of an expanded Taylor Field on October 28th, 1979, when they got 28,012 people on Rider Pride Day. And who ever thought you'd get 28,012? Yeah. Then in 1993, Sacramento was here, and they somehow put 33,000 people in there. My goodness. And then
I remember in 95 they had 55,000.
Now people don't even blink when the attendance is north.
It's such a good number. That 35,000 is it's all gravy. Like this is all money for the team. But I'm thinking, you and I, we look up, we see the empty seats. You go, this is the sea of green. Come in and there's empty seats. You go, there's just kind of a different feeling to that. Even though they're 10,000 extra empty seats, and that's product. But I just wonder, maybe this is the one game. It's a Saturday game. It's supposed to be beautiful. I think maybe everyone go and rake the lawn in the morning, maybe, or whatever they got to do, and then come on and watch the Roughriders play the Eskimos.
Get the servants to do that.
That's true, too.
I think that BC game here, that could be the one that puts the attendance over the top. But we're about to go over the top time-wise if we don't, or get the old vaudeville.
Well, we'll be in attendance at that game. We'll fill our space in the press box, and we'll get back here on next Tuesday to talk about that game and the BC Lions game, back-to-back Lions Stampeders. Going to be a lot to talk about next week.
A lot of Saturday football coming up over the next 4 weeks. Thanks for being with us today. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone, and hope you'll join us again next week. Take care.
I've waited all week for Saturday afternoon.